My wonderful guest today is Zayn Daniel. So thank you for joining us today, Zayn. Zayn is an intuitively guided light worker, an accomplished publisher, and captivating speaker. He helps people achieve mental and emotional health, bliss, and peace by fine-tuning the subconscious mind and activating the heart. Before entering the spiritual world, Zayn was a successful video game producer for 20 years, producing high-profile games such as Mortal Kombat, as well as virtual reality games. In 2013, Zayn went through a life-changing experience, which we'll definitely be talking more about later. And at this point, Zayn discovered his connection to numerous extra-dimensional collectives, spirits and other entities, including the Hathors, the Ancients, the spirits of Ayahuasca, the Arcturians, and the Andromedans. Zayn has created his unique modality, soul essence activation. He incorporates intention and sound harmonics to bring the soul's essence to the surface. This unique modality clears mental and emotional blocks, crystallizes DNA, and raises the vibrational frequency of participants. Zayn also works with one-to-one clients to remove specific blocks to self-esteem, self-love, prosperity, personal relationships, health, and countless other struggles to allow for an unencumbered spiritual and emotional growth. Zayn is also the writer and producer of a graphic novel comic series, Righteous, which is about a mass spiritual awakening. Both his graphic novel series, Righteous, and his unique modality, soul essence activation, are both powerful catalysts for enlightenment for readers and clients alike. So grab yourself a cup of tea, come and join Zayn and I in this exciting conversation today, where we'll be talking about video games, ayahuasca, the voice, not the sort on telly, and you'll find out what permaculture, channeling, and tribes all have to do with each other, and we'll discuss the roles of interdimensional beings, and Zayn will lead us into an activation at the end.
Wow.
Well, welcome, Zayn. I'm so excited that you're here.
I want to tune in.
This is about you. This is so exciting. Your bio is awesome.
Oh, well, thanks. It's been fun, and it just keeps growing every day, every week, every month. There's some new amazing thing that's happening, and it's just amazing to be a part of it. So thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm excited to talk about all this good stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I'm so excited, grateful that you're here and to be able to share this exciting journey that you've been on. Isn't it really incredible journey, and it sounds like it's been quite an exponential one as well for you. But I thought maybe if we could start a little bit at the beginning, maybe going back to your childhood, because I really relate to that. I think what I really liked was that the fact that you said that you're a bit of a skeptic at first.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very much so.
Yeah. And you came from quite a scientific background. Your dad was an engineer, and I think your great granddad was a chemist who was involved in the H bomb. So I kind of guess that sitting around the table as a child in your household, there wasn't much spirituality chat or religion. Tell me what it was like.
No, not at all. I mean, really, it was grounded conversation, though. So it wasn't conversation about science, really, and it wasn't conversation about religion. It was just conversation about everyday things, and we valued common sense as the word or the phrase or the whatever label that we would use, as opposed to even more so than just like book intelligence, right? It was common sense and being able to look at the world and say, okay, this is my place in it, and this is how the world works. But of course, it was backed by science. So it wasn't common sense, spiritual common sense. It was, evolutionary common sense. It was scientific common sense. So it was kind of a misnomer in a way, because it was actually quite limited in its perspective. But, it really helped me feel comfortable, feel safe. I thought I got it. I thought, I knew what was going on. I had a very healthy upbringing. My parents were both very loving, and I didn't run into abuses or traumas as a child in the home.
Mm.
That didn't come until school. So from that standpoint, it was very healthy, and it was very easy for me to look at the world in the way that they did, which was the only people that talk about religion are those who believed the fantasy stories of religion. And so if anything came up about it, it was almost like chuckling about the rest of the world that they would actually believe that stuff.
Right. Yes. That really resonates, because my parents, well, my dad is a chemical engineer, and I grew up in a very logical, head brain, very rational, analytical, that kind of environment.
Our brains was the way that it was essentially, it felt, like when we didn't look at brains as organs, we looked at them as self. And so, you've got an organ, you've got a heart that pumps blood, and we have a stomach that digests food. But the brain is not just an organ that produces thoughts. It's actually who you are. So if in their minds, I'm sure we never talked about this, but if we could extract the brain from the body, all of your consciousness would come with it, and you would still be alive as you. That was that perspective that I grew up with.
Yeah, I mean, I never even came across this whole kind of the idea that there could be a gut brain, a heart brain, they had the 3 brain ideas. Like, what? It wasn't even spoken about. Right. So it's interesting. And I think, growing up, my parents were Muslim, although they weren't strict kind of practicing. They're Turkish. And it was always religion was kind of very quiet in the background. But I remember going, well, why is God a man? Like, why does he have to be a bloke? I remember being 5 thinking this was bizarre. I'm thinking, and also, why would he want to burn his children? That's a really nasty thing to do. I've just been really confused by this whole thing.
Oh yeah. It goes on and on with strangeness with that.
As you got older, you mentioned earlier as well, it was a relatively normal, growing up, but then at school, were you a little bit different? Were you
Sure.
Feel that place?
Yeah, because I mean, my grandfather also taught me how to program a computer when I was 9. So that same grandfather that was a chemist for the U.S. government, and so we're talking about early 80s, and early 80s, anybody who was any good at computers was a complete nerd and disliked by his classmates, like I was. So I went through that childhood classmate abuse that was pretty severe. Like, it was probably the worst. There were maybe 2 other kids who were teased as relentlessly as I was, and everybody else was, moderately. So it was pretty severe, and that was certainly not easy at all. But it didn't stop me from following my passions, and my passion was making video games. Like, even as a kid, I was making them as well as playing them, because my grandfather taught me how to program a computer, so I could do that. And so that led me down the video game path, which I actually spent 22 years as a producer, before I had my first ayahuasca experience, which is, I think, what you're getting to. And that was the catalyst. So that was everything changed as soon as that ayahuasca experience began. I took all that science knowledge that I had throughout my life, that common sense viewpoint, all of that. And because I was speaking to a voice in my head that wasn't me, and that voice was the voice of universal knowledge. And I just went, oh, okay, I don't know anything. And I pretty much just threw all that science stuff out the window, and was wide open and ready for whatever this voice had to tell me. So I wasn't arguing with it. I was asking questions and just, excited about what it might have to say.
And so tell us about this ayahuasca experience. This is what happened in 2013, right? This was the life change, because you had the corporate job, you had the house, in the suburbs, you had your property developer, it was all going on for you, right? And were there any signs at that point that was source or the universe kind of trying to drop in little hints and synchronicities?
My passion had definitely waned when it came to working on video games. I'd been doing it for a long time, and it was one of those things where it was getting a little bit boring to me. It was, oh, well, I had a lot of it kind of figured out. And I'm I love challenge. And so it wasn't as challenging as it had been. So I was losing a little bit of interest in it. I also was not that happy with doing the, not even 9 to 5. It was, 9 to 10 at night a lot of times. And so I was a little bit tired of that. And so that wasn't great. So I had been trying to figure out, and that's why I'd gotten into properties, because I was trying to figure out a way to make enough money that I didn't have to work there anymore. And if I still wanted to make video games, I could do it on my own rather than work for someone else. So that sort of thing. So that was kind of what was happening at the time. But of course, that was also shortly after the real estate collapse. And I had been buying real estate before, or right as the collapse had begun. So everything wasn't going awesome when it came to that stuff.
Right.
And so there was definitely some worry that I had. I was carrying around a lot of concern about my investments and being able to keep the house that we were living in. And even the video game industry wasn't going that great because of that collapse. Everything was hurt, so I had a lot of worries, and that was one of the things that was kind of pointing me in the direction that maybe I wasn't doing the right thing anymore. When I follow my passion, things go swimmingly. When my passion starts to change, or I'm following something and it's not truly my passion, then that's when things start to kind of go wrong.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? That thing when you're following the passion, and it's effortless, right? You're in the flow, it's going well. And I was in advertising for 18 years. So digital advertising, I worked with, a lot of tech clients as well, and gaming clients. And I had that experience where I began to feel very distant from who I was, and actually that passion wasn't there anymore. And it, for me, it came out in illness. It was coming out, I was getting hints and synchronicities popping out here and there, but
I see. Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't really, coming out. And
yeah, I didn't have illness. I just had worry. I just had more anxiety. I really didn't have anxiety leading up to that very much. So it was very unusual to have that for me.
So what made you go for this ayahuasca experience?
Well, it's a very unusual one. Like most people go, they know all about it. They do their research. They go to Peru, or they go to Central America or somewhere to do ayahuasca. And in my case, it was just brought over to the house by a friend, and he didn't even really know what it was. Like, he didn't call it ayahuasca. He's just like, here's this stuff, let's do this. And I didn't know anything about it at all. I mean, it was the main ingredient, because he was calling it oral DMT is what he called it.
Right.
And so I was like, oh gosh, that doesn't sound great, because I wasn't very into the plant medicines at this point. I think I had tried mushrooms once or twice, didn't really like it, didn't even really like cannabis, none of that stuff. I had, alcohol was my vice of choice. And so I wasn't really that into it. But everybody who was there were 4 of us, that they were all going to do it. So I was like, okay, sure. I'll do this thing. I have no interest. And actually he underdosed us all because he was new to it. He didn't know how much to give us. And I was the only one who experienced anything at all. And the other 3 people didn't ever experience anything. So he just gave me enough that I got to have that experience and no one else.
That's really interesting, because isn't it DMT that can also be produced by the pineal gland?
Yeah, dimethyltryptamine. Yep, dimethyltryptamine. It is produced, or it can be produced, by every living thing on this planet. All the plants, all the animals, everything either produces it or has all the makeup so that it can be produced. So it is probably one of the more common elements. It's not an element, you know what I mean? One of the most common chemicals on this planet. So so that kind of helped me when he kind of explained that. I was like, okay, this isn't some weird foreign thing. At least, my brain's already making it. And, the pineal gland, they think that it is made by the pineal gland, and that you experience it when you dream and when you die. So when you're going through a near-death experience, you're essentially on a DMT trip, or when you're dreaming, you're essentially on a DMT trip. So what this does is it allows you to have it while you're awake, which is pretty unusual because the body will say, hey, what's this DMT stuff doing here? We're awake, we're not dreaming, and we're not dying. So let's get rid of this stuff. And so it metabolizes it. But with a second ingredient, it suppresses the ability of the body to metabolize it. So you get to experience it for, 3 to 4 hours if you get the right dosage.
So no one else experienced this experience, but you experienced it. But I think that's really incredible or interesting, because actually you then, what you do now is
a direct result.
It is this. So tell me, so this is when in the introduction I mentioned the voice, not as in, the TV program, but tell us about this voice that you heard, and what did it tell you?
So during the ayahuasca experience, this is how I knew something was happening, because I could hear a voice in my head, and I would describe it as my own thoughts, except it didn't come from me. So it was just like listening to your own thoughts. If you have a thought where you say a sentence to yourself, I should go to the bathroom now, and you go, well, I just made myself say that, right? But if the thought voice comes in, you go, wait a minute, I didn't generate that. Like, where did that come from? That's what it was. And so it essentially said, hey, you can ask me anything. And I just had a knowing that this was the voice of universal knowledge. And I didn't call it that because I didn't even know what that terminology was, but I just knew that this was deep wisdom here. So I went, oh, this is an opportunity. We're going for it. And so I asked it a bunch of questions. The whole experience lasted about probably only 20 minutes because I was so underdosed instead of 4 hours like it normally does. And so I asked it a series of questions. I asked it about past lives. I asked it about how should I live was one of the first questions that I asked. Wow. And it told me that I needed to love more. And I didn't even understand what that meant. I was like, what do you mean? I love my family and some of my friends and stuff, right? That's all you need. And so it proceeded with visuals to explain to me that I could love all and everything, and what a difference it would make in my life. And I was just like, what? I don't even understand how that works. So it took me a while to look back at that to be able to kind of get it. And it told me I was being greedy with the real estate, which was super confusing to me, because I looked at capitalism as the answer. That's how you have success. That's how you thrive in this world. Like, there's no greed with that. That's just me trying to do something awesome. So it was very confusing. But what I then discovered or decided, I thought, I wonder, this voice was so easy to talk to. I wonder if I could talk to that voice, even if I'm not on ayahuasca. So the next day or the next week, I closed my eyes and said, okay, let me ask the voice a question. And I waited. It took a little longer. It wasn't as quick, but then I received an answer, and I realized, oh, okay, so I can continue to talk to this voice even though I'm no longer under that influence. And so as I discovered that, I started telling other people that I thought wouldn't commit me, that I could do this. And they were like, okay, well, so, or whatever. Well, here, you ask it a question, and then they would ask something, and then I would give them an answer, and they'd be like, wow, how did you know that? So other people started to kind of reinforce that this thing was something kind of cool. Now, you have to also understand that I didn't even know what a channel was. I didn't know channeling was a thing that anyone could do. I was so outside of this space, outside of this spiritual new age space, that the only thing I had heard of was psychics. And I looked at a psychic as somebody who must just be a charlatan that convinces you that they know something about you, not that actually has some sort of spiritual gift. I didn't think that was possible. So to go from that way of thinking to, okay, I'm talking to this voice that knows more stuff than I do, okay, and I just accepted it and just did it, is kind of a stretch, really. But at the same time, I didn't really take it that seriously. Like, I didn't look at it as though that this was important. I looked at it almost just like, oh, this is kind of fun, like, look at this. And I would do it at parties or whatever. Hey,
Party
I'm
trick.
going to do this thing. Yeah. Ask it anything. Let's see what we get. And then we would do it, and people were like, wow, that's amazing. And that's all I thought of it. So it took a real experience, almost a life or death experience, that to open me to the idea that, hey, this thing could be way bigger and way more important, and help, and actually start to help people, as opposed to just being a party gig.
Right.
Bag.
So it wasn't like a 2013, right, next year I'm doing this for, I'm going into this, changing my job. It wasn't like that kind of quick change.
No, it took a long time before that transformation occurred. It was 2016 then that this life or death sort of situation occurred, where my girlfriend at the time, her mother was in hospice, and we were talking about how we had made some bad decisions, we thought. So it was her and her brother and myself who were in charge of her care. And we were going, okay, so how are we going to, boy, wish we'd have done this, wish we'd have done that. We didn't realize that this medication would do this. And now she's in a coma, and she's never going to wake up, and she didn't get to talk to this person and that person. And so we were lamenting this situation. And that's when Jess's brother turned to me and said, hey, why don't you ask the voice? And I, this was such a strange situation to talk to the voice to me, that I went, oh, okay, sure. And I asked the voice the question, like, did we do the right thing? Was, I think, the question that I asked. And I barely even got it out before the voice interrupted me, and it said, you did everything you did with love. And when I said that out loud, we all just went, oh yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. And then he said, I love the voice. And that was, surprising to me too, because he's a critical kind of thinker, and I didn't think that he really accepted that as something that I could do, even though he was the one who introduced the ayahuasca to us. So anyway, so that really kind of woke me up to, okay, there's this could be important, this could be really useful for a lot of people.
Wow, it's that message of love again.
Yeah,
which is really, that was beautiful, because you mentioned that. I think that was one of the first things as well when you first had the conversation. Love more, was it?
Yeah, you need to love more. Like, okay. And so then just a few days later, her mother passed, and a few days later, she and I were going to bed, and all of a sudden, I just started kind of giving her advice. This is my girlfriend at the time. I was giving her advice, and kind of forcefully. She was confused, like, why are you doing this? And I didn't really, it was weird, outside of my personality for sure. And finally I just went, I think this is your mom. And she said, you better not be screwing with me right now, because my mom just died. That, like, this isn't cool. Right. And I said, why don't you ask her a question that only she and you would know the answer to? And so she did. And the answer that came through, I can't remember it now, but it was satisfactory. So she shifted instantly and said, let's talk to mom. And so we got to have, I was kind of in and out of this channeling experience. I'd never done anything like that before. And she was able to have this conversation with her mom posthumously. And there were two kind of amazing things that happened. One was this piece of advice that came through, and I remember it very clearly. And I actually say it all the time. And that is that you've never made a mistake in your entire life, that everything that you've ever done has been perfect, and it's gotten you to exactly where you are right now. So congratulations, you did it. And moving forward, you never have to worry about ever making a mistake, because that's impossible too. You will always get to exactly where you're supposed to get to. So you can relax. And I give you congratulations in advance on that too. So that was the one big one that came through. And it, like I said, I say it all the time because it's true for everyone. And people get so, worked up over things, and it just makes you go, oh, okay, I can relax. I don't have to push so hard. I don't have to judge myself so much. All this stuff is always going to work out. And once you know that, then life is smooth and beautiful, and and a journey and an adventure and an exploration.
I feel like everyone needs to have that written on their wall, carry it on their or in their wallet, and keep that with them. That is beautiful. And that was your girlfriend, ex-girlfriend's mother saying that to her. That was what you channeled, and that's
Yes.
Wow, what an incredible experience. And that was your first time channeling.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And
Wow.
I knew that it was almost over at one point, and I said, "Do you have any last questions?" And she said, "Yeah, Mom, how are you?" And it was this amazing thing, as like all these chills and all this bliss just washed over me, and I fell back in bed with, you know, a smile on my face that I couldn't get rid of. It made my face hurt. I was smiling so much, and I just did my best to express how beautiful that experience was.
Wow.
Felt a lot better, and I know that it helped her, you know, with her grieving process.
Absolutely. God, that, you know, that whole thing just gives me chills as well, thinking what you just done and what you said, and what, I mean, to feel that as well, actually have the feelings of that, that's pretty
Right.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was channeling number one. And really, I don't really channel that often. That is not a major part of what I do.
Right.
So it isn't like a thing that people can hire me to do, because it really only comes when it's supposed to. And I don't sit there and go, okay, bring in this being, bring in that being. I'll be having a conversation with someone, and they'll say, there was a lady that was like, "I'm so mad at my grandma or mom or whoever it was, and who had died, and she was mad at her." And all of a sudden, I just like she came out of me right then, you know. But
Right.
otherwise, I don't, you know, I get that.
Not on demand. Channel this first.
Right. Yeah.
What was I gonna ask you? So then, when did the experience, I know you had this amazing experience of actually, let's go back to the channeling, because this voice that we all hear, we have this ability, right? We all have this ability within us, but a lot of us don't take the time to breathe and tune in. And I've just had crazy deja vu. That's really funny. So yeah, we just don't take that time to tune in to ourselves. And I think a lot of it's been programmed out of us, right? Through and conditioned through, you know, birth from our parents. You know, we're not supposed to kind of trust ourselves. That's that authority, right? That self-authority. I know I work with a lot of women, and you know, it's a real challenge, especially this whole thing around forgiveness piece, and the self-love. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, you know, on unconditional love, you know, and self-love, because I know you talk about that quite a lot, don't you?
Most certainly. Yeah. Okay. Well, here's one of my favorite things to talk about: unconditional love. There's lots of fun stuff, but this one I really like. Okay. So unconditional love, what does that mean? The word unconditional is a very powerful word, because it means that no matter what, insert extra word. I unconditionally, you know, follow, I unconditionally love, I unconditionally, whatever the word is after unconditional, means that no matter what, I do that. So it's actually easy to unconditionally love, easier than you think, because if we just try to love ourselves, one of the reasons that that's so difficult is because we have judgment. And we have been trained that perfection is the only thing that you can have in order to love someone. So when you were a child, you were told that you know, your parents wanted you to be perfect, essentially. Don't do this, don't do that, say this, say that. And then in school, your teachers wanted you to be perfect. You get a 100, right? You can't at 47, oh boy, that's really bad. You know, like there's judgment. And then your bosses need you to be perfect too. Oh, you made a mistake, you cost us lots of money, that's not going to go very well. So you have built up into you this idea that you can only love someone, yourself especially, when you actually achieve perfection. When you get that 100 on everything that you do, then conditionally, I will love myself. Well, guess what? Perfection doesn't exist anywhere in the universe. So you're never going to get there if you continue to judge yourself as needing to be this perfect being. Okay, so how else do we do this? I actually say that there's two types of perfection. There is perfection without flaws, which is the one that your parents wanted you to be. But there's another type of perfection, and that perfection is with flaws, that your flaws are actually perfect. They are created for you. You created them for yourself before you were born. And so you are living through this perfection with those perfect flaws. Maybe if you think of, okay, what is actual perfection? What is something? Okay, just pure light. Pure light is perfection, right? Okay, what does pure light look like? It just looks like whiteness, right? There's no blemishes. If there was a speck, then that would be a flaw, and we would say that it's no longer perfect, right? Well, what's a whole bunch of blemishes or a whole bunch of specks? It's texture. So now all of a sudden you have something interesting and beautiful because of the flaws. So that is the way that you can look at perfection with flaws. All right, so now we have to go back to unconditional. So if you unconditionally love yourself, that means that you love yourself no matter what you did. Oh no, I made my friend mad. I love myself anyway. Oh no, I ran over a squirrel with my car. I love myself anyway. Oh no, I got fired. I love myself anyway. It's actually easier to love yourself unconditionally than it is to love yourself. Once again, it's all about relaxing, right? All this pressure that we're putting on ourselves all the time, we don't have to, because you love unconditionally. And that's what you do. You are an unconditional lover. You unconditional love. You don't even have to say who you're targeting or what you're targeting. You just unconditionally love. I unconditionally love. I love unconditionally. That's what you are. That's what you're made of. That's what everything is made of. That's the only thing that exists.
Yeah.
A mail clerk sorts mail. A salesperson sells product. You are an unconditional lover. You unconditionally love. That's all you do.
Beautiful. And I want everyone who's watching this right now to say to themselves, I unconditionally love. That is your homework right now to do. I love unconditionally, because I think that is such an important piece. And that was said beautifully. Thank you, Zayn, for that. Because you're right, you know, perfection is driven into us from such a young age, and judgment and all these things.
So that's why, right. And that's why I like redefining perfection. I want to call perfection with flaws as the true perfection, and perfection without flaws as the like I said, the thing that doesn't actually exist. So we can stop trying to be perfect without flaws, and we can go ahead and recognize our perfection with them.
Yeah, we're all perfectly imperfect, so embrace that, right? Embrace that within ourselves. So I know also, I've recently read the book of Mary Magdalene's Gospel, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Okay.
And it's really, you know, in that, which is a whole other conversation, but I'm not going to read that. So I mean, won't get into it. But what you were talking about reminded me so much. This voice within. She talks about the voice within, and actually she talks about judgment as well. Once we remove ourselves that judgment piece is so strong within us. And I thought that's, you know, it's so valid, you know, something that was written 2,000 years ago to now, and we're all starting to kind of, I guess, get back to what we knew, right? What we know within us.
Well, what's interesting is that judgment, we often think of judgment as something almost divine, especially because of our religious background. So what happens? You have to be good in this world, otherwise, lest you be judged and go to a punishment existence, hell, right? Or you go to a reward existence. So the idea that judgment comes from a divine place is so flawed, and it's so painful for everyone, the fact of the matter is, if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, us as cave people, right, we were trying to survive, and we had a tribe. And in our tribal situation, we were trying to make sure that we didn't make mistakes, because mistakes could mean our doom. So if somebody didn't collect enough berries, then they were judged, because then the group could starve. If somebody was making too much noise, they were judged and told to stop. Otherwise, they might need to attract the attention of the saber-toothed tigers or the rival tribe or whatever. So judgment comes from our primitive minds. It does not come from a divine place. Your higher self does not judge you. The ascended masters, the collectives, they do not judge you. And that means that source, you as source, because we are source, I am source is the sentence, right? We definitely do not judge from the master consciousness, because we created everything. So we're going to create everything and go, oh, I'm dumb. What did I create that for? And what did I create that for? And oh my gosh, I shouldn't have dropped my ingredients. Like that just doesn't make any sense at all. So the only time that judgment comes in, it's a very primitive part of your brain, a very 3D aspect of yourself. So in order to move into that divine place, to be equal to your higher self, to the ascended masters, the angels, and so on and so forth, judgment is the way to do that, or the lack of judgment, I'm sorry, is the way to do that.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up about the whole, our ancestry, right? Yeah, it was a survival. It was how we would survive, and if not, we would die. So we're not in that place right now, are we? And we do have that in our DNA, right? The ancestry and all that. It goes back a long way. We're carrying so much history. But I think you did it was a course in permaculture. Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to hear about that story?
Yeah, that was a really cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Fun story, yeah, because that was during that awakening period for me. I had channeled once. I had channeled the Justice Mom, and I was open to this. I was starting to be open to this, and it had been something I'd been interested in. Permaculture is this incredible view of the world and of society, where we can, instead of stripping the earth of its resources, we are actually replenishing the earth's resources, and we're just skimming off the top so that we can survive. So we're producing way more than we can actually even consume ourselves, and that production actually helps the earth. So it's a really beautiful kind of way. It's permaculture, permanent culture. It's a great idea, right?
My brother-in-law and my sister brother-in-law, they live in South Africa, and my brother-in-law practices permaculture as well.
Okay,
you
know all about it, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
But
our viewers will not necessarily know. So thank you.
Right.
It is such a beautiful, harmonic way, isn't it? So so your awakening, were you kind of thinking, I need to go and look into this more?
Well, yeah, I don't remember. This is a chicken and an egg thing. I don't remember when I probably came up with the idea of doing permaculture after that first ayahuasca, but I'm not sure. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. What it was I had an opportunity to go and it's for a permaculture design retreat, which was like a 10-day experience in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee, where it was Cherokee country. It was this beautiful hilly landscape, and I was kind of thinking that maybe I would make a permaculture farm myself. I hadn't decided yet. I knew I wasn't going to be at the video game industry forever, and I liked Tennessee as an area, so I thought, well, what better of a place than to go there to get that certificate or that experience. So I went, and what I discovered was that there were 20 people that were also in the retreat, and right away we all felt like we kind of knew each other. We were just like, wait a minute, how do I know you? You're from Philadelphia. I've never even been to Philadelphia. Now I guess I don't know you. And so we all were experiencing this, and then we were also experiencing some deja vu and that sort of thing. So there was a real something magical going on. And there was a woman who was from Finland that was there. Her name's Sani. She was someone who everybody kind of gravitated to. She was this pillar of the group, is the way I like to say it. And everybody was interested in what she had to say. And I had an opportunity on the first or second night to have a conversation with her. And she was a Reiki master, and I didn't really know that much about Reiki yet. So I was kind of trying to find out more. And she was telling me, then all of a sudden she stopped talking to me and she just stared at me in the eyes. And I didn't know what to do, but I decided to stare back. And I don't know if you've ever done that before, but the whole world starts to kind of wave in and out and everything as you're staring for a while. And then the next thing I knew, I was no longer present in my body. I could tell that I was talking, but I was not driving the vehicle at that moment. And then she said something, and then I felt this wave of disappointment wash over me. And then I was returned to my body. And I was like, what just happened? And I asked her that. And she said, oh, well, you just channeled an entity from another dimension. And I'm like, what? Like, okay, how do you know that? And what kind of entity and what? And but I asked, well, what did I say? And she said, oh, well, you asked me to leave this world with you. And I said, okay, well, what did you say? And she said, well, I said no. Like, oh, okay. Well, that would explain that wave of disappointment that washed over me. You disappointed this entity and then it left. Okay, this is insane. You know, that was my second channeling experience now. Wow. And that wasn't really that long. It was like a couple of months later that happened. And then she asked me, hey, so do you believe in past lives? And I went, oh no. Okay. So I hadn't totally believed in it yet, but I wanted to hear whatever she was going to say next. And I also didn't want to lie and say, yeah, I believe in past lives. So I heard, I think it's a Socrates quote, or it's one of those philosophers.
Right.
The only thing I know is that I know nothing.
Yeah.
So I said that. And so she's like, okay, it sounds like you're open-minded to this. So then she proceeded to say that she definitely believed in past lives, and that she, a couple of years ago, had this experience where she was in meditation and she relived this past life. And she realized that everybody in this group also had that same past life, because she remembered that we were all a Cherokee tribe. And she believes that that's why we're having these feelings of deja vu. That's why we feel like we know each other. And we've been brought back here for some reason. And she didn't know what the reason was. So she just wanted to tell me this. And instead of me going like, okay, yeah, but I don't believe in past lives, I just allowed that information to come through. And I thought, wow, that feels right. And so then I proceeded to just tell as many people as possible in the group, hey, Sunny believes that we're a, past life from a Cherokee tribe. Let's see what they have to say about that. Like, so interested. And then every person said, oh, thank goodness. Okay, that explains it. Thank you for telling us. Like, okay, wow, everyone believed this. Cool. So then another day or two passes and I have another conversation with Sunny, and she says, okay, well, I feel compelled to tell you the full story. And she explained that during this vision that she had of this past life experience, this tribe was under attack and everyone had to escape the village because we weren't going to win. And they had a meetup point already mapped out in the forest that everybody was supposed to go to, and if an event like this occurred. And she said she was one of the last people to leave because she was making sure she got everybody out of the camp. And when she finally got there, she found the spot and the whole tribe was there, but they were all hung to death in trees. And she explained that she had been actually crying at this moment, and she felt like she was crying because those people had never been grieved for. So then she said, I would also like you to not tell everybody about that one. I'm like, okay, that sounds fine. She's like, it's kind of gruesome and stuff. Like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So then more days pass and I have an opportunity to speak to another member of the group. And this is similarly, he was a pillar as well. He was a farmer, rough and tumble farmer. But he could sing and he could play guitar and he could rap and he could do all this fun stuff. Everybody just loved him too. They all were drawn to him as well. And I had an opportunity to go on a walk with him early one morning. We were on the walk and I said something like, isn't it cool that Sunny thinks that we're all from a Cherokee tribe? And he goes, what? No, I hadn't heard that. And I was like, oh, I thought I told everyone. Okay. And then I just explained the basics, right? I didn't tell him what I wasn't supposed to tell him.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, I have to tell you a story. And he said that a couple of years ago that he had been worried about his farm. He was worried he was going to lose his farm, and he could, was carrying this weight around with him. And a friend of his had come over and saw how burdened he was by this. And he put his arm on his shoulder and said, John, are you okay? And he said he just started crying, and he started crying so hard. He's never cried so hard in his life. He was crying and crying. He ended up on his knees. He was crawling around on the ground. He crawled outside and he grabbed onto a tree, still crying, and he closed his eyes, and he said that he saw that he was walking through an indigenous forest, and he came upon, a forest, and he came upon an indigenous tribe of people that were all hung to death in trees. And that he felt like at that moment he was crying because they had never been grieved for.
Wow.
And I went, okay, I'm not allowed to tell him the thing I want to tell him. So I said, you need to tell Sonny this story. And he's like, why would I do that? It's so gruesome. And, like, no, you really need to. And I said, and please make sure I'm there because I need to hear this. So anyway, of course, it worked out that we were together on a group project that day, just the three of us, with the 20 people, we were randomly selected to be in the same group. And so I proceeded to have them tell each other the stories, and they were amazed, and they were also like, well, yeah, because that's what happened, right? Like, so they both. And so for me, that was the critical moment for me to go from being skeptical, being like, okay, it would be really cool if all this stuff was real. I would really like to believe all this stuff is real. But now I just had the experiential proof that I needed, that was just too exact, that was too perfect to not have, I have no doubts now. And so that was me walking through the door and saying, bring it on, I'm ready. Yeah. And that's when I really started to get lots and lots of information, downloads, and my gifts started to appear and everything.
So that's when science was like, right, thank you, out the door now. This is all science as you knew it, I guess, as we know it. Right. And then it's just, that was like the icing on the cake there, really, wasn't it? To hear all that. Yeah. How incredible. Yeah. And wow, and how incredible that you were all together. You were all back together in this lifetime. I mean, how awesome.
Right. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. So, and are you all, I just have to know, are you all still in touch with these guys?
Oh yeah. Not all of them, but a couple of them for sure. Yeah, I visited Sonny a few times now. So yeah,
cool. It's great. Oh,
yeah.
Love it. Love that story. So this was the second experience of channeling. Was that when you had the entity? You mentioned that entity, right?
Right.
That's you channeled. So it was like you mentioned it was what kind of entity? Did you say what it was? It was a
no, I just called it the voice, right? And what I've learned over the years is that being able to find out who the person is, the entity is that I'm speaking to, is not always so easy for me. And the reason that it's not so easy for me is because every time I ask, they usually say it's not important. The healing is what's important. Right? Like they kind of don't want me to be distracted by that. And it's been interesting because I've been interviewed by people who really want to know, like, tell us about the Hathors and all this, all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't really know that much because they don't tell me. I know that it's them, but that's about all. Unless I do research online, I don't know any more than you do.
So I guess it's the message that's the important thing.
Right.
What they're trying to channel through.
Right. And so people are somewhat disappointed by that, but I then use it as a teaching tool because we like to have everything in neat little boxes. We like to be able to say, okay, this is that, and this is that, and this is that. Once again, it comes from that primitive ancestry. The more we knew about the way the world worked, the safer we were. And so we could get over fear by knowing things. So now we still want to do that. And so I have to ask, why do we want to know this? Like, what, is it really that important? Or is it the message that's more important? Is it the healing that's more important? Who cares who the identity is? Because you're source and you've created all this anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
It's that 2D brain again, isn't it? That polarity, yes, no, right, wrong. You know, what is it going to have? That's how we kind of like to, I guess, compartmentalize and put things into our little boxes. So, so how did you then download your gifts, and what are those gifts, if you don't mind sharing?
All right, so this is an interesting one. It's kind of a long story, and I don't usually tell it that often. People actually don't ask. It's kind of funny. Okay, so I had been working with a light worker training coach. And what was interesting about him was that he wasn't teaching me any modalities. He wasn't teaching me, you know, how to channel or how to do any of that stuff. His method was simply to say, you brought with you incredible gifts that are unique to you. And so all we're going to try to do is tease those out of you. And his process, I mean, his special gift was simply raising people's vibration. And so that's what he did. And he just raised my vibration and raised it until next thing you know, I'm having crazy dreams. I'm doing all this wacky stuff. And my gifts essentially materialized during that process. And it was kind of a long process. And it was fun because it was during meditation where I was asking, okay, so what are my gifts? And the answer that I got was, well, yeah, I'm really paraphrasing here, but the answer that I got was, you know, that comic book you write, that's you. You've been writing yourself. And it's like, oh my gosh. Okay. So what, you know, so now I have to read my own comic book to see what my gifts were. And it's like, oh, okay. So it's this and this and this. All right. So how do I do it? And then I just had the knowing of how to do it. Like it was just, oh, I just say this, don't I? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So it was really a wild kind of conversation that I had over a couple of different meditation experiences. And then I just started trying it out on people. So the main thing that I learned was the sound that I have to make when I do it. And so you've probably, if you've watched my other things, you've heard me do this. And if anybody else has, they know that it's, I say a word, but the word isn't that important. It's the sound that comes out that is most important. And the word is a really nice word because it has a great like to it when I say it. And so when I didn't really know for sure what I was doing at first. So the very first person that I did it to, I had no intention. I just said the word, and then they were like, okay, I'm having trouble having negative thoughts. That was the first thing that they said. So I went, oh, okay. So it's just a total experiment. It was really amazing to just experiment with people who were open to it. And as I continued to experiment, people would say, hey, can you do this? And I would go, I don't know, let's try it. And then it would work. So it really was kind of this amazing thing where if I make that sound and I have a particular intention as I make the sound, then the thing that I'm intending actually comes to be. Wow. So what I was discovering at first, with I have no intention whatsoever, if I just make the sound, all it does is it provides a ton of energy and opens wide your third eye chakra.
Right.
So that's it by itself. So then once I discovered that, then I started to go, okay, maybe I could do it for all the chakras. And so I went through each chakra and I did it to myself as my first experiment, and I could feel each chakra as I went up the line lighting up and be.
Woo.
very intense, and I could take deeper breaths when I worked on, after I got through my chest, then I could take these big, huge, deep breaths that I couldn't seconds before. So I knew as I was moving up the chakra line that it was having a major effect on me.
And this was a particular sound. So it's a frequency that you're creating with the sound, right? Because sound is so powerful, right?
Yeah, it is. And I don't know, it might be the frequency. I don't know exactly. It's just this crazy, wild feeling when I do it. And I, I don't know. It might be. There are aspects of it where I do hit frequencies,
No.
and and what happens is they tell me the frequency. Either I hear it in my head, or they take over me. So I start going, and then all of a sudden I'm finding that I'm shifting my pitch, and I'm going, oh, I didn't do that. And
Right.
they, and when I say they, I'm talking about the Hathors.
Right.
They're making these changes to my pitch, or they're making a change in my mind so I can hear the correct pitch. And if you know anything about the Hathors, they are very sound based. Tom Kenyon is probably the most famous Hathor channel, and he does all kinds of different crazy vocal noises that his range is way bigger than mine. At this point, I haven't been able to hit some of the tones that he can. But he really blazed the trail for we Hathor channels.
Wow, that's incredible. And given that, I look at the universe, one sound, this is all so connected. And has music been, or sound been, something that has been part of your life and your journey? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I was writing my own music and things. I don't play any live instruments, but I definitely write my own music, or have, and so yeah. And I love, of course, having music playing. Yes.
That's cool. Yeah. So if music is a part of you as well, that's one of one of your gifts. And do you say the same thing every time you do it, or is it get channeled? Okay.
I do say the same word every time. I've tried some other words and it just sounds silly, so I just go with one. But like I said, I do the toning too.
What I wanted to ask about the Hathors, I know you don't want to, I'm not going to ask, who it is from the Hathors or anything.
Oh no, yeah, I can tell you a little bit about them.
Just because, what is their role? What have they, what are they here to help humanity with, I guess, at this time?
Sure. So they're just like the Pleiadians or the Arcturians, except that they were incarnated here, actually, on Earth during Egypt's Golden Age. During that time, I was also incarnated among them. And that's where I learned originally how to do this, the soul essence activation and my other gifts. Right. And so it's been kind of fun because I've got a friend who channels the ninth dimensional Pleiadians. And every once in a while, I'll just go, hey, can I talk to the ninth dimensional Pleiadians? And she'll do it for me. And then, but the very first time, it was great because all of a sudden they saw me for the first time, and they said, oh, yay, it's Awakener. They just had a name for me, not the Awakener. They just called me Awakener, which is kind of funny because that's the word that I use, awaken, when I do my activation. And they said, you've brought this technology with you throughout most of your past lives. So that was kind of a cool, reinforcement to what was going on for me. And anyway, so the Hathors, just like any of the other collectives, they're here to help their people. So they're here to help me. And it's really been an amazing experience, because there will be times that I will be in meditation or even on ayahuasca, and they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, for instance, you're not asking for enough. And I'll be like, what do you mean asking for enough? Like, we're here to help you. We are here to do whatever it is that you want. We believe strongly and firmly in that you have the best interest of everyone in mind. We totally trust you. So you need to ask for more. And I'm like, okay. And at the time, I was trying to sell a property because I was trying to get out of the real estate business, right? And I was trying to sell a property, and it wasn't going very well. It had been on the market for a little while, and then there was no movement or anything. And I said, okay, well then, get this property sold for me. And they said, you'll have an offer by the weekend. And it was I think it was Sunday, so they meant by the next weekend. Well, on Tuesday, I had an offer, and it went through the easiest sale I'd ever had. And so they then taught me kind of how to ask for things. They taught me how to manifest very specifically for them. And so they gave me the process. And so now when I go, okay, here we go, it's interesting because I actually don't want to ask for too much because I love this ride exactly as it is. I love this journey exactly as it is. I don't have to change anything. This is crazy, wild, beautiful, amazing, terrible, horrible, terrific, everything, all of it. And so I'm here to experience this. I feel like I'm not here to snap my fingers and change everything. I'm here to help as much as I possibly can within the limitations of this 3D, moving to 4D, moving to 5D world. And here's how I describe it. Some people want to go, how do I get to 5D? How do I get to 5D? How do I get to 5D? I say, okay. So imagine that I had a door right here and I opened this door for you and you could see through that doorway that was a 5D society or a 5D consciousness. Would you go through the door? Would you go through the door?
Yes.
Okay. Of course. Yeah. Everyone would, right? So what would happen? You step through the door and you find yourself still here, and you go, Zayn, you lied. Like, you told me I could go through the door and I go to the fifth dimension. And I would say, well, actually, the only way you can get to the fifth dimension is if you say, no, I don't need to go through the door. Everything here is exactly beautiful, perfect, magical, and wonderful. And I feel like I'd be cheating if I went through that door and left the 3D, and that means that you would be in a 5D consciousness, because
we have what we have.
The reason that you want to escape 3D, the reason that you want to get away from 3D is because you're in a lower vibrational emotional state. You're in fear, you're in frustration, you're in disappointment, you're in worry, you're in anxiety, you're in shame and guilt and all the negative lower vibrational emotions. Only when you say, I accept that I'm in the third dimension, I am optimistic that it's all going to work out great, I'm excited to be here and to see all that's going to happen, I am grateful to be here in this third dimension exactly as it is, I unconditionally love the third dimension exactly as it is. Oh, guess what? You're in a fifth dimensional consciousness.
Yeah. Once we
so that was kind
of
where
we are, accept who we are, where we are. Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of that's why I don't ask for too much from them, even though I could, because I'm here to enjoy this and have all the possible experiences exactly as they are.
Absolutely, exactly why we're here, right, in this 3D, in this physical way. And I was I going to say? I was going to ask. No, it's gone. It's gone. It doesn't want to ask. It doesn't want to be asked. That question doesn't need to be asked. Clearly, we need to move on because to the next one. I did want to ask you a little bit about your comics, because I do love the fact that this is a really cool introduction to the, I guess, a broader target audience, right? It's a broader audience, and you are being able to reach those people who might not necessarily be interested in maybe watching this, these type of conversations.
Oh, right. Yeah. So yeah, that was an amazing kind of experience, because it was during 2016 that I actually started writing it. And I was witnessing the US election with Bernie Sanders as this guy who, was very, strange to me, because he was, always on the side of what he thought was best for the people rather than what was best for himself or the political agenda or things like that. And so that was strange to me, because I'd never seen anything like that before. And then I remember watching old videos of him in the 80s and 90s. He's like beating his hand on the table, his fist on the table, and going like, oh, this isn't good enough. And you could see all the other senators and Congress people just going like, oh my gosh, would this guy just shut up? Like, why wouldn't he go away? And I know that if I had seen him during that time, during those periods, I would have said, oh my gosh, what's this guy doing? He's an idiot. But at that point now, I finally realized, oh my gosh, this is kind of how it should be. He is actually trying to help people. What an amazing thing that he's trying to do. How beautiful that is. And then I thought, well, what would happen if everybody woke up one morning just wanting to help others, being essentially what he represented? I don't know for sure if he was doing that, but it sure seemed like it.
Mhm.
So what would happen if the entire world woke up and all we wanted to do was help each other? So I started kind of like imagining that, and I started writing these little short stories about what that day would look like, and how it would look at a news station, at a TV news station. Okay, well, wow, this is we've been lying to the people all this time, and now we're not going to lie anymore, and we're going to tell them what's going on. Okay, that would be an amazing day. The CEO of Walmart goes to work, and he gathers all his people together, and he says, instead of using all of our money for ourselves and our stockholders, we're going to go ahead and feed all the people in the world. And then of course everyone would go like, yay, because of course they woke up with that same mindset of wanting to help each other.
Yeah.
And so all these short stories ended up turning out to be like no conflict, because it turned into a utopian society overnight. And I went, oh my gosh, that's the solution. That is the solution to the utopian society. I'd never thought of it in that way before. So then I went, well, I really want to write a story that has conflict. This isn't going to work as a full-time story. How could I do this? So I thought, well, what if the main character is the only one who wakes up with this?
Right.
So so I pick a greedy corporate analyst. He's got his house and his wife, and he's got everything going right for him, and he's super good at his job, and he's just landed a huge account and all this great stuff. And then he has a supernatural experience overnight where a being of light comes and touches him on the forehead and changes him so that he can only help others, and he can't just make money for himself anymore. So he wakes up the next morning like the reluctant hero, not really wanting to do all this, but being kind of almost forced to. And then he discovers, of course, how rewarding and beautiful it is. And then he discovers that every time he helps someone, they get it too. So they wake up now, help others. So we're spreading it slowly, almost like a disease, which is kind of funny because, of course, then, as I've been writing it, I wrote this whole quarantine situation and all this stuff years before this all happened. So my artist started drawing the quarantine stuff in March of 2020. And he's just like, wait a minute, what did you like? I know I wrote it 2 years ago. Like, this is goodness. Crazy. Yeah. So anyway, it's an ongoing series. He's starting to draw chapter 19 now. I'm writing chapter 21, and I guess it's not an ongoing series. It will end. And with these giant lessons for all the characters. And what's been really beautiful is that people have been reaching out to me from the mainstream, because I wrote it very mainstream focused. I didn't write it with a whole bunch of spirituality terms. I've got some nods, like the being of light comes at 1:11 a.m. Yeah. So people, in our spiritual world will get it, right? but other people won't. They won't know what's going on. And anyway, this experience has been that people have reached out to me and said, I read this comic book and I'm different now. Like, what did you do to me? Because the other thing is that I imbue the comic book with soul essence activation. So anyone who reads it receives that energy healing. And so even if they are, completely outside of this world, they experience that. So I had a guy from Africa, for instance, who read it, and he was miserable because he lived in Ghana, Africa, and there was no jobs, and he was young and feeling like he was a failure, and he couldn't make the money that he needed to make to pay his bills and get food and all this, and he was a miserable wreck. And he read this thing, and then he was super happy, super motivated. He just decided to help people, and he became super employable because he was so dynamic and cool and happy, and everybody really liked him. And so, things have gone very well for him. So, and I've had multiple stories like that come in through people who have had that experience. So it's really been an amazing experience. And I'm working right now getting it turned into a live action TV show, because
Cool.
it's a comic book, but it doesn't need to be. It's regular everyday people.
Yeah.
There's not like superheroes in tights and all that sort of stuff. It's a standard story. So I'm looking forward to that. We've written the pilot script so far and all that. Yeah.
Awesome. That's amazing. That's so cool. And so beautiful that it's touching all these people and, reaching people in ways that, you might not have thought of before. Were you thinking about this back in your video, your video producing days? Had you ever imagined that this is what you'd be doing now, here and now?
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe the comic book, I would have thought that I'd be doing that, because that's kind of related to video games, but otherwise none of this. No, for sure.
And so can I ask, there's so many other things I want to ask you, but I know we're running out of time. So I just want to ask.
Well, I guess we'll have to do this again.
Exactly. I'm glad you said it. We'll have to save the other questions for next time. And I remember the other question, but I'm going to save that for next time. Well, we want to know, what is next for Zayn Daniel?
Oh, wow. Well, a lot of things. The Higher Self Expo is getting bigger and bigger. So the 4th version of the Higher Self Expo is coming out in July 2021.
Oh.
We've got 6 hosts across 3 continents, 24 straight hours of the expo. For the first time, we're going to do that. So we've got people, light workers and scientists and world changers from all over the world going to be speaking at that. So we're super excited about it. The theme for it is where science meets spirituality.
Love it.
Yes. And then I'm also the host of a 4 times a year event for Awoken TV. That is kind of a Gaia up and coming TV channel that you can get to through awoken.tv. And that is going to be an equinox event coming up here in March 20th.
Woohoo, yeah.
So those are some fun things. And all those other amazing things, like my YouTube channel, I put a lot of content up on there. And then I have a class, an online course called Detached, that helps people detach themselves from really anything. It helps you detach from your childhood traumas, or your need for love, or your need for other people to do the right thing for you, or negative entity attachments, which is the major part of it. And we've had some incredible success with it, but it is just the attachment. Said it can be about anything, and it's essentially an ascension course. And so we've seen some people go from very low vibrational states to very high vibrational states, and they're starting to discover their gifts and that sort of thing. So it's been a really beautiful experience, and it's just another way that I'm trying to help the world move from 3D to a 5D consciousness. And I would quickly sum that up as a 3D experience is being fear as the dominant emotion, and a 5D experience is having unconditional love as the dominant emotion.
And this is the time, isn't it, where people have been experiencing so much fear, and it's a really testing time for everyone. So let's hope that everyone along with us moving up through those higher frequencies. Yeah. I'm going to include all those your YouTube channel, your Facebook link, the Awoken TV, what did your Higher Expo. I'll put them all on the YouTube Higher Self Expo. I'll put them on your Detached. I'll put all those links on the bottom of the YouTube page, and also the social media pages as well, so everyone can find you. Excellent. And of course your website. Let's not forget that. Right.
Yes. I've even got a TikTok.
Have you?
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I mean, it's almost easier because, it's only got to be a minute, no longer than a minute for TikTok. So, I can do some of my activations on there, which is kind of like, cool. Okay, we're going to do an activation. Here we go. 55 seconds to do an activation, but it still works because it really is just that sound that I'm talking about.
Which we'll hopefully be able to experience in a minute.
Yes. Let's do that.
Let's do it. Okay.
All right. So this is a burden release activation. So this activation is pretty cool because if you think about, I want you to right now check your body. I want you to find any kind of pain or discomfort that you might have. It might be a weight on your shoulders, a tightness in your chest. It might be actually physical pain works as well if you've hurt your knee or whatever. But the most powerful and beautiful method or use case for this is when you have these discomfort areas, and especially if you've had them for a very long time. If you think about where in your body you're storing your traumas, your difficulties, your worries, whatever, then that's generally the best place. So if you found that, then I want you to close your eyes and take a nice big deep breath and relax as you exhale. Feel yourself sinking into the chair that you're sitting in or the bed that you're laying on. So I really want you to focus in on this discomfort area. You are looking at it with the curiosity of a child. You're really looking at it and thinking about it. And I want you to imagine that you're describing it to someone else. How would you describe it? Is it a weight? Is it a tightness? Is it an ache? Is it a pulsing? Whatever. Just be open to whatever it is and really think about it, really feel it. And then if you can remember what might have caused it originally, what could have been that first thing that caused you to store this wherever you're storing it. So maybe, my example is I had a friend who had his older brother or a friend of his sit on his chest when he was a kid and he couldn't move. He was totally helpless. And so all of his life he had carried this kind of weight on his chest and he didn't even remember why he had. But if you can remember the situation. Now, before you do this exercise I'm about to ask you to do, make sure that you do not have PTSD related to this event, because what I want you to do is go back to that event as much as you can, put yourself back there, think about the situation that caused this. And of course, if you have PTSD, you don't want to do this because that can be triggering and problematic. But if you don't have PTSD, then remember this moment, remember this experience, and try to make the discomfort feeling intensified. Make it the worst that you can ever remember feeling it. Really feel that feeling in the worst possible way. We're really going to root it out and remove it. So you've got that in your head, remembering that. And now what I want you to do is imagine that I've injected you with a colored dye or ink. You choose the color. This dye or ink is attracted to this discomfort area. And so now, if you could see through your body, you can see the shape of this discomfort area lit up in the color that you chose. So now you're thinking about what caused it. If you don't remember, that's okay. Just intensify it. You're thinking about what it feels like and you're seeing what it looks like. And now I'm going to do an activation. And the way my activations work is I'm going to say breath in. When I do, all you've got to do is just take a nice big deep breath. And you can hold it until I say the word awaken. And at that point, you can exhale. But just keep focusing on what it looks like, what it feels like, what might have caused it, and intensify it as much as you can all the way through the activation. Breath in. Awaken. Good. Okay. So you can just relax for a moment. Sometimes it goes away right away. Sometimes it takes a few moments. Sometimes it takes a few minutes. So just give it time. What I'd like for you to do now is try to intensify the feeling again. See if you can bring it back. Okay. All right. Well, that's really all there is to it. So when you are ready to go forward with less burden, then you can open your eyes.
Yes. Wow. It was really funny. I have to say, when you were talking about intensifying, I had all these, I can't describe it now, like pins and needles go through that area. And I felt that, I was like, that's so weird. Actually, everything went to the area. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So did it lessen?
Well, I've been having this, there is a pain that I have, and I'm going to see it, well, when I move, and I can't feel it at the moment, but I'm going to let you know later. I will be messaging you later and say,
okay, good.
It's gone.
So the other thing to do here is, the first time we do it, it's very dramatic, and usually it goes away really strongly, really clearly.
Right.
However, in 24 hours or so, it might start to come back. So what you do is you listen to it again, and you do the same thing again. So you'll want to listen to this activation, because you're retraining your body, you're retraining this area to be clear. And so if each time you listen to it now, it won't be as intense of a feeling, but when it comes back, it won't be as intense when it comes back. And you keep doing it until it's gone for good.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Thank you. And your voice changed as well. It was cool.
Oh yeah, what do you mean?
When you said before you said awaken, you said something before that, or maybe it was when you didn't say inhale or
breath in.
Breath in, that's what you say. And it sounded different.
That's cool.
Changed. It was very cool. I was like, what was that saying?
Right, it's the voice.
It's the voice, exactly. Oh, Zayn, this has been so awesome. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure and such an interesting conversation, and tons more questions I've got here that I want to ask you, so we're going to have to catch up again.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do want to say, let me say one more thing, because we touched on this earlier, and this, we were talking about talking to the voice, right, inside our heads. And I kind of have a method for that I want to give to everybody, because I feel that we have many different people inside our bodies, right? Or inside our heads, or however you want to say. We have a child who is always available to us, that loves to explore and loves to touch the fuzzy thing and loves to play, right? That version of ourselves has unconditional love for all. It's actually a great way to tap into that. And that version of ourselves is completely innocent and beautiful. So anytime you can, be a goof. Skip down the sidewalk, juggle the oranges at the grocery store, be light and have fun, right? So we can cultivate that that aspect of ourselves. And I highly recommend that everybody do that as much as they can.
Definitely.
Then there's the master. There's a child and there's a master, and that master is there all the time. It's accessible at any time. The master knows the answer to any question. It also has absolute unconditional love for all, for you, for the child, for all aspects of you. And that is the thing that I'll explain how to access in a second. But there's a third version of us that I feel like we spend most of our time as, and I call this one the adult. The adult thinks it's the master, and it uses the rules of the third dimensional society to make all of its decisions. It tries to predict the future based on past events. It tries to have a 5-year plan, or it tries to use the investments to make more money and all of this. It also has impatience. It's impatient with the child. It says, we don't have time for this, or we can't afford this. It's there, judging and guiding, and it almost never gets anything right ever. And so
And it's kind of based in a bit of fear, isn't it? That little kind of,
yeah.
if we don't do that the right way, if we don't do this, if we don't toe the line, serious. Right. And I know we all get serious, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, then, you know, the adult, we want to be less and less and less, and we want to be the child, and we want to be the master as much as possible. The child's fairly easy to access. The master is a little bit different, and it's not difficult, but it's different. So how I recommend everybody do this is that what they'll do is you'll close your eyes and you'll go into a meditative state a little bit. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to be an incredible meditator. You don't have to do everything, you know, perfectly like that. All you've got to do is just take a couple of nice, big, deep breaths. And then what you're going to do is you're going to ask the master a question. It can be anything. You probably don't want to ask questions about the future because that's a timeline deal, but anything else you can ask it. Why do I get so angry when this happens? Why? But let me correct that now. So that's all perfect, except you don't want to say the word I. You want to say your name. Why does Zayn get so angry? Why does Zayn think that this is so great or so bad? Or why is Zayn experiencing anxiety right now? Or has Zayn shared any past lives with this person or that person or whatever? It can be anything. You can access the Akashic records doing this. Really, any information that you want, you can do this way. So when you ask the question, again, using your name, you looking at yourself in the third person, then here's the key is that you don't answer it yourself. You wait for the answer. So if you're going to ask me a question, you don't ask me a question and then blurt out the answer. Oh, I bet you it's 3. You know, whatever, right? I'd be like, what are you doing? Like, give me a chance to answer the question, right? Like, what? There's an interview. So you're doing the same thing when you're talking to the master. You ask the question and then you wait for the answer. You just sit back and wait. Guess what happens? You go into a meditative state, whether you want to or not. Because when you are listening, then your mind is at peace. Your mind is waiting. Your mind is just and waiting for something to happen. If you're walking through the forest and you hear a sound of a bird or an animal or something, you stop walking because you don't want to make any more noise of rustling against yourself or stepping on any twigs. And you like tilt your head in the direction that you thought that the sound came from. And then you wait. What are you thinking about at that moment? You're not thinking about the last person who came over and visited you. You're not thinking about whether you got to get more gas in your car. You are actually in wait mode. You are in a meditative state.
Yeah.
So when you ask the question of the master and you wait for the answer, you're meditating. Now, the information may come through in many different ways. For me, at the beginning, it came through as a thought voice, right? Like I said, I called it the voice because I heard sentences. Now it's not so much like that. Now it's like I have this knowing, and the way that I would describe the knowing is that I feel like, oh, why did I even ask that question? I know what he's going to say, or I know what it's going to say. Oh, I know what it's going to say because it just told me.
Yeah.
And so that's hard for people to recognize. They just think they've predicted what it's going to say, but no, they've received the information. Another way that you'll see it is maybe you'll see it as visual or you know, or a feeling throughout your body. There's all kinds of different ways. So you just have to be open to however it comes for you. Yeah. So that is my method and tool to get to that voice and to get that information.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for bringing that up. Actually, that was one of the questions on here, and I'm so glad because I really wanted to ask you that earlier on. And it's so important. I think that's so. Thank you so much for sharing that. And actually, one of the methods that I use I channel through writing. So a lot of my information comes through just through writing. And a lot of people who probably watching this probably don't know that either. So, hey, that's what I'm doing. That's what I do.
Nice. Automatic writing.
Yes, automatic writing, morning pages. Yeah. So Julia Cameron, actually, that's where I first read it, from The Artist's Way.
Yeah,
And
that's great. If
it's
you're a
great.
touch typist, where you don't have to look at the keys, it's amazing because your eyes are closed and you're just typing, and then you
Yeah.
read it and you go, oh, right? Like, because maybe you're not even conscious of what you're typing. You can even just type it one word at a time. What's the next word? For. What's the next word? Because, whatever. And then the next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a complete sentence and
Yeah.
it makes total sense. It's related to what I asked.
And
Yeah,
it's great. You keep your eyes shut, and then you're writing. You're thinking it's going to be just gobbledygook. It's not going to look like anything. You've got, the red line underneath it, and you're like, "What? There are actual words on here."
yeah. They all make sense. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think, like you said, everyone has access to this within them. Access yourself and be in that place of mindfulness, that meditative mindful, the Buddhists call it mindful, just being aware, right? Being self-sensory, as we call it in Kundalini. It's self-sensory. Just get into that state,
right?
Stop that monkey mind, because that's what gets in the way of a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Zayn.
You're so welcome. What a pleasure. So much fun.
Such fun, such a pleasure, and I can't wait to have you on the show again.
Yay! Me too.